Today we've got Ruth Marshall, who's the Director of R&D and Data Integrity at Practera. Practera is a startup company based in Sydney that specialises in modern tools for remote learning. I'll leave it. Ruth will describe much better what Practera is about. But in cooperative research centres, we really find that we are supporting particularly postgraduate students. About 6% of all postgraduates in Australia are funded by CRCs, and that's the one common thing. There's been 245 cooperative research centres over the 30 years of the program, or something like that now. And the one common thing is that they must have an industrially based PhD program. That's the one aspect that hasn't changed in the guidelines for 30 years. And of course, getting more practical experience into particularly postgraduates, but also undergraduate degrees and other workplaces is taken off exponentially in the last few years. And I don't know what exponential on top of exponential is, but since COVID, it's gone absolutely through the roof, the interest in the area. And it's also, from my experience in the CRCs, running a CRC for 10 years and now running the association for all the CRCs, it's probably one of the areas where we do more reinvention of the world than any other. In that everyone wants to have the best possible program for their postgraduates. In particular, they might have 20 or 30 postgraduates. But it's very common then that they don't really get going until well into year one, perhaps into year two of their cooperative research centre. And then we tend to lose the learnings, and I hate that word, lose the lessons by the end of the CRC. So we've partnered with Practera for the last couple of years now to try and help develop the tools so that they are then available, that they're available on a commercial basis to CRCs and anyone that wants to use them, so that you're sort of starting at with the platforms there and learning off the shoulders of people that have come before, rather than starting out all enthusiastic and finding the workload is really too much. And it's really important to get it right, because just putting people out in a workplace to learn doesn't necessarily mean that they are learning from that experience. And so that's why we got Practera on board, was that they're experts in actually turning not just the tools for doing so, but ensuring those tools are designed in such a way that they enhance and lock in the learning experience. So Ruth, thanks for joining us. I'll hand over to you for the session.
I will share my screen. Here we go. And go into presentation mode. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So thanks for the introduction, Tony. I'm here to talk about what we do with Practera, particularly around right now when you guys are coping with the vagaries of COVID-19, but why this is important and really actually more of an opportunity as we see it in some ways to get ahead of where we think a lot of especially skills development programs and collaboration programs are going as well. So sort of a way of setting up for the future, if you like. So as Tony said, I apologize for the photograph, but I'm the R&D director at Practera. I'm also the R&D sector lead, so sort of any sort of sector sales within the R&D sort of profession, which is not a major area of our activity at the moment, but it's growing, such as CSIRO, university research departments, that kind of thing. I generally have a sort of involvement there, and obviously CRCA And importantly, we're CICA members as well, because we have a CRCP that we started on in September of last year. So very happy to be part of the whole family here, and talking to you about what we do a little bit more. And as you can see, I've got a sort of bit of a technology background, not a learning background, but we've got some very skilled people with a pedagogical sort of background as well. Mine is sort of more on the R&D and computing side. So really, we firmly believe that this is actually as much as an opportunity right now that's facing us as a challenge. In the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see quite a lot of things changing, particularly as we go through the current period of social distancing. But coming out of that, we strongly believe that education and skills development is going to go through a fairly significant and rapid change, and change that it's been going through slowly anyway, and in some areas more quickly than others, but one that is being accelerated quite considerably because of this pandemic. So there's a couple of things in there. One of them is that obviously, whereas online is being picked up at varying degrees depending on the organization and their necessities, it's really going to start becoming a baked-in piece of a solution going forward. Part of people's pandemic planning going forward after this, or even just strategic planning for their organizations, is going to make sure that some significant online capability is baked into whatever they offer, so that the next time around they're more prepared. So that's going to mean a massive sort of, I think, or we believe as an organization, growth in interest and activity in online skills development. And so if we can embrace that now and be ahead of the curve, then we're in a better position to stay competitive with others who are doing similar sort of things as well. The other side is the focus of R&D, and this is something that would be an interesting sort of get your take on it, because obviously you're much closer than I am. But we've sort of done some thinking and talking, and really feel that from a government incentive perspective, and just generally from longer term strategic planning perspective, we may see quite a shift in the focus of research skills development going forward. So there may, out of this, become an increased interest, for example, in manufacturing. I know manufacturing or advanced manufacturing is already a focus for in terms of government sort of industry growth areas, but we might see that broaden quite considerably. We might see that broaden from a workforce perspective as well. So bringing technical, not just research, but also very hands-on technical training, apprenticeships and skills development to be able to get into manufacturing. And that might also come with a significant growth in industrial PhDs and industrial research. And for very obvious reasons, right? We're all being caught a little bit short with our shortage in manufacturing ability around the place, even though I'm glad to hear from Tony last week how some of the CRCs are coming to the rescue. But still, I think that's definitely going to be in transition. So there's a lot of things that are going to come out of this episode that we're in the middle of right now that we should be taking advantage of. So whatever we're doing now in order to improve engagement, keep people collaborating, if we have researchers that can't go in to the lab right now, keep them developing skills in other areas that are applicable to their research whilst we have this problem in place. But look at it as a way also of sort of fast tracking a transition into a sort of different world going forward, where online skills development and also just skills development across the board will become a much more important focus of the education industry. So we really see this as a sort of lasting impact, whatever we're talking about putting in place now. So a little bit about Practera, where we, of course, we would say we're the world's leading experiential learning program provider, but we really are. And we say that because we come at this from a very strong pedagogical background. So we are, and we're very focused on experiential learning. So as I'm sure some of you already know, most of you, I don't know, experiential learning is a sort of a fairly strongly supported theoretical theory around skills development. It's basically, it's succinctly learning by doing. So you learn by doing some real world activity. You then reflect and analyze that activity, look at what went well, what didn't, maybe reach out to an expert or a mentor to help you understand that analysis better. You then replan and go and do it all over again. It's something that's been really heavily practiced in nursing and medical sciences, those sorts of things, for quite a long time. And it's something that's gaining traction throughout the education sector, particularly when it comes to learning those sorts of skills that don't have a yes or no answer. So in other words, operating in the real world, developing this sort of skills that enable you to operate within the grey zone where there's no obvious answer, and developing those sorts of skills that you can't read about, you have to just practice and do, such as communication skills, presentation skills, and those sorts of things. So that's what we're really all about. We also have a lot of experienced instructional designers who design all sorts of programs, and we have a very powerful back-end tool that lets people manage online experiential learning and monitor how students are doing, and even get assistance in how they might intervene if those students are not performing as you would expect. So our whole vision at Practera is being able to do experiential learning at scale. Doing it well is very difficult. You need experienced mentors and supervisors and coordinators. And that's why these programs are expensive and why the very privileged few get access to them in really good university programs around the world. And we really think that with the platform that we have and the capabilities that we're offering, that we can start being able to deliver those at scale. And that's what we're here to do. So we do three things, basically. Our platform, I guess, is the main thing that everybody sees. It supports learners and mentors through this experiential learning cycle. And that's why we're not just well, I shouldn't say just, that's a bit rude, but we're not a traditional linear sort of online learning platform that offers up content that is then consumed by the learner and then maybe gives you some tests or some exams on that content and then you move on in that form. We're really about supporting a lot of the stuff that's not even happening on the platform, which is the experience piece, and putting some things into practice, and then our platform helps guide them through the reflection, analysis, and planning process that enables them to learn from that, and also helps industry mentors and other experts provide input as well. If students are doing this on their own, they'll get there eventually. If there are industry mentors, experts of some kind who are in there helping them, reviewing the artifacts that they're working on and providing them well-structured feedback at the right times, then as any educator would know, obviously that's going to improve their productivity as learners quite considerably. But we also have a lot of project programs, and we have many thousands of students and huge network of industry clients who help us with these. And they're basically programs that, and I'll talk about them a little bit more detail in a minute, that allow students to go through a real world engagement in industry. And that engagement would involve them working in a team and solving a real world project problem that the industry member has, and they would get an experienced mentor, usually from fairly mid to senior level management position in a large corporate, to provide them with the kind of feedback that somebody would be able to provide at that level in terms of their professional skills development. And it enables people to literally walk in the shoes of somebody in an industry placement. And that's at the moment mostly delivered to international graduate and undergraduate students through about half the universities in Australia and some overseas, but it's also being used in other contexts as well, extremely successfully. And then obviously we do design and delivery of programs as well, and we have very skilled designers to do that. We did a pilot, and I'm really pleased to see a few friendly faces as I logged in, or names. We did some CRCP pilots late last year, and it revealed a few things. It wasn't 100% successful. There's one area where we had some challenges. On the majority though, well, I'd say the strongest thing is across the board that it revealed a very strong appetite in the graduate student cohort for skills development. And in fact, some of the faculty members that participated as well from some of the universities who weren't strictly speaking PhD students got as much out of some of these programs as the PhD candidates did. So there's definitely a very strong appetite for the kind of skills development that we offer in the groups, the cohorts that we worked with. Some of the feedback that we got, and this is the sort of consolidated from one or two different programs. Willingness to recommend was extremely high. As you can see, it averaged 9 out of 10 score, and the lowest score was 5 out of 10, and that was only 11% of the population. So there's a lot of willingness to recommend these programs. They also were asked at the end of the programs to answer whether they thought it was effective in developing their professional skills. And again, a large percentage of them said yes, it was. They also outlined which skills they felt were best developed. Interestingly, they were all also asked if they thought they would be able to translate the skills that they learned back into their project and research, and most of them answered. Another 66% said yes, absolutely. A lot of the skills they were learning in these programs were translatable. The written feedback was probably the most interesting. It was, as I said, just revealed a very strong appetite for really starting to develop skills, professional skills, communication skills, teamwork, presentation skills, project management, those sorts of things. All of that was very strongly strongly received, well received, as well as innovation programs skills as well. One area that we had less success, and I think that was a real learning for us, was in our mentoring programs. We have some very successful mentoring programs that we do with universities. They're usually industry mentors that we put in place to help students develop their professional skills. It's sort of like almost like a professional coaching sort of role, if you like. Those were less successful with the 2 pilots that we ran using mentoring. We've got a lot of learnings out of those. The main reason that we've come up with is that we needed to do far more education of the mentors and the students to understand how this mentoring program would work before we roll out a mentoring program. I actually think now is a very good time to try that again, now that we know how it needs to be established. It is more about getting the context of the program right. I think there was a bit of confusion as students. They weren't really quite sure what was expected of them and how that worked in their sort of normal educational setting. But I think there's a lot of promise there from those learnings. Is everybody still with me? I just want to check. I heard something in the background there. Hello? Yep, cool. Yep. All right, and Thanks. Any questions as well or comments, please? And Caroline, because you did one of the mentoring programs, if you had anything to add to that, by all means, or want to say something at the end, please do. So, so really, summary is there's a strong appetite. There were about 4 CRCs that participated. We have 5 programs in total. There's a strong appetite across the board for skills development programs of the type that we did. So what are we talking about now in terms of how we can use that and the sorts of programs that we do to really evolve the way we do skills development going forward? And this is really going back to that picture of what can we do now that will start engaging, giving our graduate students or PhD candidates a level of engagement and skills development opportunities whilst they're not necessarily as active at university, because depending on what they have to do, they may not have access to what they to their institutions and labs, etc. But also, how do we use that and capitalize on what we have to actually turn this into a longer term transition to this sort of new way of working, so that first of all, we can have online collaboration and skills development capabilities baked into our model, so that going forward, we don't get caught out by this when it happens again, and when is, I think, the operative word. But also, is this something that's suitable to a lot of CRCs anyway? There's a lot of CRCs whose students are extremely dispersed. One of the biggest challenges I came across when we were putting this pilot together was the challenge of actually having all the students together in one room in order to run a workshop. I think that's often a once-a-year opportunity, if that. So if we can start doing things within a platform that enables people to collaborate and develop skills and do training programs without having to physically be in the same room, then I think we're starting to evolve a skills development program that's well suited to the sort of anatomy of a CRC, if you like, or at least many of them. So there's a few key things here, though. We're not just putting content online. There's a few things that are essential to get engagement, and it's really about engagement most of the time. And that is, although they might be virtual, i.e. online, they still have to be real. In other words, not that I'm contradicting myself. So the projects might not be happening in the world that we touch and feel, but they're still real teams with real students. And if we're doing business projects with real clients and with real mentors, and they're having real conversations, producing real artifacts on which they can then, using which they can then learn and develop skills. That is an essential part of keeping engagement and real skill and proper skills development. And that is the real, I keep saying real, that's great. That is the fundamental sort of thing that underpins what we try and do at Practera. So when we're talking about work simulations, for example, we're talking about a fully simulated consultancy type engagement. We've got a few different ones that we can choose from. And in fact, I saw Prashant and Balaji online. I don't know if they're still there. They ran one of our work simulations, YesTech. But they still worked in teams together. They did group projects, group deliverables together, and they had a real mentor advising them along the way. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. And there was constant dialogue between them. So we have a range of different things. I'm suggesting mentoring as well during this managed program. Work simulations are great because they're all online. They're not particularly onerous. They're kind of fun, but they keep people in teams. They keep them connected to you as the educator or another mentor that you might select. So the level of engagement is very high. Mentoring, I suggest as well, simply as a way of, if you're not able to all see each other anymore or be physically in the same room, a mentoring experience might be what's needed to keep some structure in place for people to continue sort of checking in, producing deliverables for their mentor, and still continuing along that skills development continuum, even though they're all stuck at home. We've got virtual project as well. Then they're sort of like work simulations, but they're real life clients. That would mean bringing in an actual human client into the whole process, and they would put a brief forward. And skills workshops and what have you. So as we go forward, we can then transition using the same capabilities and tools into more workshop-oriented things. We've also got an industry challenge program where we can actually start bringing in your industry partners as well to start looking at how students and industry partners can connect more collaboratively and constructively. And then we go into a whole potential around credentialing all of these things. Any one of our programs have micro-credentialing capabilities. So there's a possibility if we put a real sort of cohesive piece of a framework around this, that we can generate a full portfolio at the end of their tenure, the student's tenure, with a developed sort of skills portfolio to go alongside their PhD. So those are the sorts of things we're talking about. And that means just pulling a whole framework of capabilities together that work now, but also can take them forward into this new world. So I'm going to just quickly run through all the programs that we have on offer, because I know a couple of people got on specifically to see what else was available. I would love to demo them, but I don't trust being able to do video comms and demo at the same time without something falling over. So I'd be very happy to set up demos at another time if people are interested. So how am I doing for time, Tony? 12:28. I'm okay.
You've got about 10 more minutes.
All right, so I'll have to be quick then. So as I said before, real world projects, they're actual projects which have a real client somewhere in the end. And they address very specific business concepts. So you can have Future Radar, which is looking at mega trends and technologies that affect an industry. We have a shared value program, which is about teaching students how to find a full shared value sort of proposition with, you know, social, economic, financial, those sorts of different values, bottom lines. And then we've got a deal book, which is great for students who are interested in productizing ideas. It's actually finding funding sources and those sorts of things. So they have to do research and actually generate a document at the end, with recommendations that are actionable to a real world client, and they will be used. Industry skills builders, they're like YesTech, which the CRC Care went through, and there are others. And we could even do facilitated workshops in a more traditional thing that are just over Zoom. And they're fully simulated business strategy type of engagements. Again, there's a real mentor. The students are put into real teams. They can coordinate their activity, email and Skype and Zoom and all that. And they produce real deliverables, and this YesTech and a few of these other ones have a sort of branching design, so that depending on what advice they go with at the beginning, it'll take them down a different path, and they'll have a different set of sort of black swans and issues to deal with. We then have a number of innovation programs and impact research and impact programs, including we've collaborated a lot with the CSIRO. They've done a day in the life of an accelerator associate, and that's a great program for anybody that's thinking of going into an accelerator of any kind. You actually get 4 real world applications that were made to the CSIRO. And then David Burt, who's just the outgoing director of that program, the CSIRO On Accelerator program, will guide you through how they made decisions on whether or not to accept these 4 applications and the various pros and cons of each application in detail. So that's kind of useful. And we have various flavors of innovation accelerators, one of which we gave in a workshop sort of to Honeybee Products CRC last year, and it was extremely well received. That was a role play one that was really focusing on simply on requirements analysis and collaborative design. There are others that look much more at the commercial end of things. So it depends on what piece of those innovation programs you want to accentuate. We then have, as I said, industry programs. We have a lot of opportunity, I think, through the same mechanism to bring our students into industry more actively, so that they can start understanding industry better. And we can also bring industry in to understand what we do in the CRCs better, using an industry research challenge, for example, for students to be assigned into some participating industry groups to look at and provide them with some horizon planning on the kind of technologies that the CRC is working on that could be applicable or useful to that industry. We've also got industry knowledge workshops, which is simply about the CRC providing information out to industry, not just participating collaborators, but their industry in general, in order to inform them and get them more active in collaborative research, maybe even assisting them. One we're talking to Sairo about, you might even assist them in putting business cases together for that. So they're really good programs. And as I said, we have mentoring. We have different flavors of mentoring. We have a peer-supported mentoring program where students not only are teamed up with an industry mentor and activities that they need to achieve, but they're working towards a common goal as well. So they can actually talk to each other. Aside from the mentor, they can kind of help each other improve the way in which they use that mentor and the use they get from that mentoring relationship. And then there's a structured framework as well for bringing industry mentors in and just coaching students on real industry knowledge and expertise. That was an area, as I said, that didn't work as well with the way we had set it up in the CRC programs, but I think we've learned a lot from that, and we've certainly had a huge amount of success in other situations with these programs. And then lastly, we've got a lot of opportunity, I think, either as a basic CRCA branded thing or an individual CRC branded thing, to start looking at how we can then pull all this together into micro credentials and certifications for the students. And how does that actually add value to what the CRCs are delivering to the student population as well, so that these, as I said at the top of this presentation, these sorts of skills, I think, have become increasingly important in terms of, and as Tony, I think, also indicated, in terms of how people regard and measure success of PhD programs. And I think that's been given a real sort of injection of steroids with this COVID-19 thing, and the sort of way that research, I think, and education programs are going to evolve following this crisis. So there's a strong possibility of, from a value-added perspective, pulling micro-credentialing into this and being able to allow the students to have this as part of what they come out of the CRC program with. So just briefly, how others are managing. We're engaged obviously with a lot of our existing university clients, students on pause, student success programs, all sorts of things about how they can do the managed piece of this whole thing. They're really, the main thing is keeping the collaboration and feedback real. So not just serving up content for them to consume and then take a test in, but engaging on our platform in order to still stay in STEAMs, still communicate with mentors and supervisors and what have you. And the Skills Passport is really sitting at the center of a lot of these students on pause and student success program and various other university programs. They've really sort of taken on board the Skills Passport as a way of saying, this is how we're going to show at the end of this that the students have done something and they have something to show for it. So that's been quite significant. So as I said, it's our team. You've met me. We're extremely well versed and knowledgeable in pedagogical theory and experiential learning. I'm probably the odd one out in not having quite the depth of background that everybody else has in that area, but I've certainly done a lot of R&D over my time, so that's where hopefully makes up for it. And we're happy to work with you. So I believe that Tony was saying that they will be available, these programs across the board, pending sufficient demand. So I think he's waiting to hear that there is an appetite for these programs. There's an appetite to work on this kind of a framework, or at least test out and start using some of the programs. So I think over to you, Tony.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Ruth. And I welcome any questions.
Problem.
Just put your hand up, and we've got 20 minutes for questions and discussion. And as Ruth said, we were due to convert this program to an individual CRC pays for their access through as an additional membership. But what we're trying to do, because of the current situation, and many of you will know, we run about a quarterly or 5 times a year face-to-face workshop called Collaboration for Industry Impact. And obviously we can't do that at the moment. So we've said, oh, we better put it onto a really good platform. What's a really good platform for doing our workshops? And so part of what I want to do the deal with Ruth's company this year is to convert that so that we can offer that more often as well. Particularly love to hear from those that have been working with Practera and using this with students to reflect on that experience. Who online has used it? You mentioned a couple, Ruth.
Yeah, so Caroline, I don't want to put you on the spot. She had used it. Unfortunately, it was a mentoring program, which probably wasn't the most successful. Balaji and Prashant were online, and they did YesTech, which was very successful. But I think they've dropped off. I'm not sure what happened to them.
Balaji's still there, I can see.
Okay, well then, yeah. So they're the two that I've spotted.
So Caroline, tell us your experience, which was.
Yeah, so we did a mentoring type program with the MinEx CRC students. It was designed to, first of all, try and get them thinking about soft skills rather than and personal development skills rather than their actual thesis topics, because the students are from such a range of backgrounds, from, you know, to break it down into two, from purely engineering through to purely geoscience type projects. So to get you know, something that would be of you know, common industry interest to them is a little bit hard. So that's why we went with personal development type skills. So what we tried to do was actually facilitate some engagement between the student and their industry supervisor, knowing that not all of them had ever met their industry supervisor of their project because they were new PhD students, or even for those who had met them, they tend to only talk about science and not maybe actually get into the other discussions about the type of skills that might be required within the industry that they might be interested in going into. As Ruth mentioned, and I absolutely support your comments there, it was the mentors who were the industry supervisor. They actually posed a really big challenge. So we did I did a survey of those mentors prior to the app being released, and basically asked them what they thought about such a mentoring program. Did they think it would be beneficial? There was quite a mixed response. Some were absolutely all over it. Others just went, what are you doing this for? That's just another thing that I've got to put on my plate. Which was a little bit disappointing, because you would think that people who've been working out in industry for a while and are at the point of supervising students would understand the importance of soft skill development. So it was really the engagement of those mentors that needed to be improved for that program to actually be successful. Yep.
So can I just add a couple of things? So we did also sort of top and tail a workshop, a skills workshop that they offered to their students as well. And I think that was extremely successful because it allowed people to do preparatory work and questionnaires and all that sort of thing, and follow up. I think from a mentoring perspective, where we've been successful, we've recruited industry mentors ourselves, and we have quite a massive network, many thousands, I think, over the different states of industry mentors now, who, if it's an industry sort of skills development thing, could be equally as useful as the supervisors. And so one of the learnings I had from this is that maybe that would be the better way to go going forward, because they're putting their hands up as volunteers. They want to do this. It's amazing how many people are sort of later in their career in sort of middle management, upper management are really interested in taking some researchers under their wing, not for completely altruistic reasons. They also want to know a little bit about what they're up to. So there's, you know, but there's a lot of expansiveness in industry around that space. So that's possibly maybe the better way to go. If we go with the same structure that we did this time, I think all it means is, and we can do that as well, just more onboarding, more effort by us put into onboarding the mentors beforehand. So maybe putting them through a program so that they understand the benefits to them as well of why they would want to do that.
Has any thought been put into, if you do actually go out and recruit industry mentors, if those mentors are outside the participant group of the CRC, and the students are being asked about, you know, oh, so, you know, what are you up to in terms of your project? There's potential breaches of confidentiality there. So has anything been thought about there?
Yeah, I mean, generally that hasn't been a problem, but definitely, I mean, so the main place where that happens a lot, where we do that a lot, is on CSIRO's ON program. And obviously they're all volunteer industry mentors. They've got hundreds. It's less of a problem than they anticipated it was going to be. And there are also confidentiality agreements and various other things that are signed before they are allowed to go forward, and quite strict sort of guidelines around IP and around what they can and can't talk about. And it's also something that the students themselves get briefed on before going in. So it's been less of an issue, but it's obviously something that, you know, you need to put the right guards around, such as the right sort of formal agreements with them. They can't just come in, just do it. They have to have signed mentor agreements.
I remember from the old dairy CRC did a very successful industry mentoring program, but they put much more work into the mentors than the mentees.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
I think that's the Gardner Foundation organised that one out of Victoria, and it's I'm an industry mentor for the IMNIS program that ATSI's running, the Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, and they do put a bit of work in.
Yeah.
They have the advantage, though, that you're so past the science by the time you're mentoring, you wouldn't understand it to steal the IP.
It's true as well. No, but that's a very good point, and that's something we normally do. And I think because it was a pilot and we were doing it on a very short time frame, et cetera, not enough of that was done this time, and it was an oversight. So, but I think is Balaji or Prashant on board? Can they talk about their experiences?
Balaji, do you want to go? You might be on mute. No? We're not hearing you or seeing you.
No.
So you took yourself off mute. Prashant? Well, the names are there, but they haven't got their cameras on. So, oh, there we go.
Yes, Prashant is here. Yes,
Hi.
so we ran the program with our students at University of Newcastle, and Balaji was the leader for that. And our students and staff who participated in the program liked it a lot. And so we were in close contact with Ruth and Jane throughout this program. And Balaji can provide more feedback about this. Balaji, can you hear us? Balaji, you there?
I think I'm hearing something just faint, but not.
Yeah, maybe there's something wrong with the sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime,
more closely involved with it, so Balaji would be able to provide.
Okay. Well, so I happily follow up later. I mean, one of the I hope you don't mind me saying, Balaji, and correct me if I'm wrong. Well, you can't because you can't speak. But and one of the things I mentioned to Tony about that experience, and it was YesTech, as I said, it was a fully simulated work experience where they have to make a decision for a software startup about whether to stick with a particular piece of software that was being run or switch to another one. And then it's a sort of branching thing. So depending on what they decide, they have to then go down a different learning path and experience. And they have to work in teams, and the main thing is they do a lot of video presentation on this one. They have to actually defend, it's not so much about what they decide, but how they defend their decision, right? So they have to do research, they have to understand the market, they have to understand the various bits and pieces of information that they're given from the company. It's all done on video online. And they have to then be able to defend the reason that they're giving this particular advice. And they do that 2 or 3 times in the process. Balaji's team, I think, felt that, 2 of the main areas that they really felt they lifted their skills was in teamwork, but in communication skills. And they felt they reported, and I'm going to get the details wrong, but they went to a conference the day after they finished this program, and there was some kind of challenge project going on. Oh, there's Balaji.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you.
Balaji.
I was just going to talk about this presentation that you did at the end of the program that you all sort of entered some competition or another that you felt.
Yes, I've been listening to you. Sorry, I couldn't figure out the settings in the beginning, but I could do it now. It's fine.
Okay.
We can hear you fine, Balaji. So tell us about this competition.
Yeah.
Yes, we were 8 of us who participated in this pilot program. We worked as 2 teams. And main thing was selecting a product which is more efficient and useful for investors. So when we try to start working, we found it difficult to get together as a team. But as the program progressed, we were able to understand the dynamics of a team and how each team works. So due to this, we were able to come up with interesting solutions through video messages, which was totally a very good experience. One thing we found immersive was the interaction between the teams and also within the team. So we were communicating regularly and try to come up with solutions.
Yeah,
especially selection of products.
It's a pretty intense program over a short number of weeks, and they definitely had to sort of nut out the solution and do a lot of defending of their decisions. Balaji, I was saying that tell them afterwards, because you said, remember that at the end of that, you guys had the confidence you felt as a result of that to enter a competition. Do you remember what that was?
Yes, we went into a competition. It's called the Innovation Challenge within our university. So we try to use some of the principles and methods we used in this Practera program. And we were able to win the competition.
Oh, you won.
So yeah, our team tried to bring up a business model for remediation of the contaminated lake. It's especially Lake Macquarie. If
Yep.
you don't know, Lake Macquarie is the largest coastal lake in Australia. So it is situated 150 kilometers north of Sydney. So we try to use some of the methods and principles which we learned from Practera, and our team was won the competition.
Oh, congratulations! That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I believe what you said, that you probably wouldn't have had the confidence to even enter if before you'd done this.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It gave us some confidence within our team. We all were scared of public speaking initially, and also we were so we were like introverts. But after this program, we were able to express ourselves and also challenge the competitors in terms of the methodology we approach to solve a problem. So
Yeah.
Great.
we got it.
Now we've only got about 5 or 6 more minutes before we have to end this webinar. So I wanted to see if there are other questions or comments that can be put briefly to Ruth. Ruth, who does the micro-credentialing at the moment? You mentioned we could do it as the association. Where do you think the students or the participants value it the most?
That's a very good question. At the moment, the ones we do, it's either the university, depending on the program, it's either us offering it or the university. And usually it's the university. So yeah. I think there's a lot of value in devising a sort of credentialing program for the CRC, so that's CRC owned and issued, because I just feel that, you know, that's
yeah, I ran the what we called the Balanced Scientist program for the invasive animal CRC, and all the deputy vice chancellors loved it. You know, they were quite happy for the students to do it. We required 40 days experience and 40 days coursework. It was 80 days over their CRC. We gave them 6 months extra scholarship if they wanted, and it was extremely successful in their motivation and get it, and they stay nearly all still in the industry, to be honest.
Yeah.
And really worked well. But I remember one of the dissatisfying bits was that, you know, they got a bit of paper that with my signature on it and the chair saying good on you, because the idea of putting it through an academic board at that time was pretty frightening. They can take longer than a CRC.
It certainly can. So yeah, so the ones that we have, so for example, we've got a micro-credential, there's a couple of innovation programs that we do for master's capstone projects, those sorts of things, and they're all credentialed through the university, obviously. And some of our skills passport, like RMIT does one of our skills programs that is credentialed through them. It can take some time, but it's also something that can build up over time. So you can start building up micro-credentials that are just literally open badges or something that they can then post to LinkedIn, Facebook, you know, or whatever, and put it on their resume. And then we can start thinking about building up a more comprehensive program based on, you know, acceptance and success. It's not something that has to be done initially all at once. So I think we should give some thought to it, because I think it's useful for the students, and if everyone's doing different things, we're not getting the power out of it that we otherwise might. Sorry, and also having a program, a skills sort of credential that enables people to bring in evidence of skills development from elsewhere as well. So it doesn't have to be just criteria. It could be, you know, some publication, some presentation, or participation in an industry program, or something like that, with the right amount of evidence, obviously, underpinning it, could also be included. So it's a way of sort of building a more sort of comprehensive picture of what they're doing outside of the strict sort of bounds of the PhD, which could be very useful, especially if they're looking at developing a career in industry. So yeah, but I think going back to the skills, I mean, as I think Balaji sort of outlined really clearly, it's really about what they're doing, not about the content that's on the platform. It's about them being given the framework and the tools that they can then, and also there is content that helps them learn about teamwork and collaboration and all those sorts of things. But it's really that process of actually going through and physically and actually doing a simulated job that is what gives them the real boost in skills development, as opposed to just reading it. And as I said, I think they did about 3 or 4 presentations to video in that process, and each one of them was provided with feedback on that, so that they could see how to improve the next time.
Great.
Yeah.
We've got time for 1 or 2 very quick questions or comments. Everyone's been very quiet online, yeah. But I could, from Rose, I can paying attention very well. Can you make sure you just email me and say your CRC or wherever you're from would be interested to continue to participate, so that we can work with Fractira to make it as possible there, so that we can do it. I think in this period of strange times, it's more important than ever. And you can see a lot of CRCs won't hold their student day this year, and you can put those resources to developing some content, whatever, for the students, and still keep them engaged on a more regular basis. So hopefully we can give you a product that's really worthwhile.
And just to say one other thing, in case, just so there's no misunderstanding, a lot of these programs are not a huge overload in terms of hours and commitment. They're usually 2 to 3 week programs. Some can be longer, and actual sort of time commitments can vary quite considerably from that. It's not a full-time sort of activity. I don't know if Balaji says that they maybe spent a couple of hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week on it. So it's something that is not going to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge time commitment unless they have a lot of time to commit. And then
well, it's always worth doing extra education. I remember when people screamed, the academics, when I said let's make them do 80 days of extra learning in our CRC, but actually the completions were better.
Yeah.
And they didn't most of them didn't need the extra time on their scholarship. It sped up their PhDs, if anything, because of the skills and experience they're picking up throughout, and their keenness to get out, because some of them are offered jobs by their work placements. So
we certainly found that with some of our capstones as well.
It's not 80 days of training just pushing out the rest of the thesis. When you consider some students have never even done very basic time management or things like that, they pick all that up as they go along.
Tony, I've got a really I've got a really quick question, Tony. In terms of things like the industry mentor program and stuff, is that on offer for like ECRs or the like? So our young academics who might not have had this kind of opportunity in their own PhD prior to being involved in a CRC?
My response is we'll be guided by you. We count ECRs for our ECR speaking competition as 2 years before PhD or Masters and 5 years after. So we go a bit further out, calling them early career in terms of it's not just PhD students. We're happy to hear from them.
Mhm.
And I agree, suddenly you finish your PhD and you're asked to manage people in a lab and a $300,000 budget and don't go over by 1 cent and things like that. And it's really quite a shock
Wow.
there. And the more we can help people do that with a peer group who are all going through the same thing, it really would be quite a helpful thing, I think.
Mhm.
And CRCs are a big employer of early career scientists. So, if we all started talking about that, we'd probably find where, the engine house of many CRCs is the postdoc position.
Yes.
Some not so much, but they tend to be a good employer of postdocs, and very often can give them a 5-year contract or a contract that's a bit more generous in terms of career development than some of the other fellowships where, people have been asked to do 2 or 3 years research in 1 or 2 years, and they just don't have time for beyond their research topic type skills development. And then particularly I find in the medical space, they find they're 32 and unemployable because they've only looked down a test tube for the last 10 years or whatever, and they haven't been given the opportunities they should have got. And the medical sector, they really burn that postdoc position quite badly in a few places. They're getting much, much better at it in career development, but I think we've all got a responsibility there.
Yep.
All right, we've gone 2 minutes overtime now. So I'll thank Ruth, thanks Jordan and
Thank
Amelia
you.
for organising, and finally thanks everyone for attending and participating. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, all the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.